Okay, right. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, thanks to the first two speakers. It was really engaging, really interesting to listen to that. And with all these kind of speeches and in almost every conversation I have at these kind of events, it reminds me each time why they're so important. Because, we in this room, I don't think we're necessarily a representative sample of the population out there through the glass doors. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and creativity and a will to change in this room. And through there, that also exists, but there's also bureaucracy, there's also resistance to change, and it can be a little bit demotivating, as we know, no? And this is why we need these events, get together to realize, I'm not the only one that feels like this, and to recoup our energies and get back out there. Thank you. So, I am, as he said, academic manager at SA Business School here in Barcelona, and I work in an educational consultancy as well called Elastic, and we work a lot with teacher training all over Spain in primary, secondary, and higher education. So this is the world I inhabit, and this is why I've chosen this topic here. It's something I'm quite passionate about. It's facilitating deeper learning in higher education. Now, it's a colossal, complex topic, so just to kind of plot a course through it, I'm just asking one sort of guiding question, which is, if we take a good hard look at higher education and say, well, look, how can we ensure, or try to ensure, that higher education equips our young people today and tomorrow with the skills they need to face the challenges that are coming? Now, the challenges I refer to are, obviously need no introduction. The 21st century, we heard yesterday about employment. There's a lot of difficult situations happening. I don't need to tell you about climate change, diminishing resources, all that kind of stuff. Things are changing at a pretty bewildering pace, and it's kind of impossible to know what sort of world we're actually going to bequeath to our kids. It's very hard to predict. What we do know for sure is that alongside the opportunities, there will certainly be pretty complex challenges. Now, love them or hate them, a group of people have kind of got together and said, well, look, here are the skills that we think people need to have to face the challenges in the 21st century. Now, it's a big umbrella group of different concepts and characteristics and traits, but essentially they kind of group around three main areas. You've got these kind of cognitive skills, things like self-reflection and critical thinking. Now, I think we can all agree that we don't want our kids to be the type of people that kind of pick up a newspaper, read an article and go, well, if you say so, sir, that must be right, and not think, hey, well, where's this from? What's the agenda? We need to have people that can actually ask questions and solve problems. And we need people to do things by themselves as well. We can't have people that need to wait to be told to do something. They need to be self-directed, need to take the initiative. And of course, all of this is for nothing if you don't have the communication skills to get your ideas across, to inspire change, to bring others with you, and have the teamwork capacities to work across cultures. So you can see, this is the kind of area that education is really aiming to help equip students with these skills. How are we doing with that? Well, I'm just going to flick back to my own education. It's not so very long ago. Back in Edinburgh University up in Scotland, and I was educated in this building here. I started off doing literature and philosophy. And if we zoom in here, I think we're going to find an educational context, which I guess most people in the room, if you've been in higher education, you're familiar with this sort of scenario, no? And now, I'm not going to immediately start beating up on the lecture format. That's not my intention, because it could just as easily be this. What I'm focusing on here is the monodirectional flow of information with a teacher talking to an audience of students and them simply taking notes. Okay? Now, when I reflect on my experience in this context back in university, I received an awful lot of information, key information, through passive transfer. I was in the room, it was just kind of poured into my head as an empty vessel, as we say, I had no control, no pause button, no rewind, I had no choice in the topic, and I had no way to engage or ask questions. And I think I'm very guilty of this, of kind of, being a bit critical of university students and saying, why are they always saying, is it in the exam? Why do we have to know this? And trying to tell them, hey, but it might not be in the exam, but it's in your life, And we never seem to win the argument. And then you think, well, we should maybe look a little at the system, because if you actually have a system where you take away students' voice and choice, you also take away any chance they have of developing internal motivation, which is the thing that drives great change, And if you take away internal motivation, you're left with the poor second cousin, which is external motivation. I got to pass this exam because if I don't, my parents are going to kill me, That's not exactly, creating leaders of the future, So I'm moving towards exams where I'm expected to regurgitate the knowledge, I'm basically in a situation where, memorization is favored over internalization. And this is, to various degrees, I think, familiar to people. Could be even from high school as well, Now, people say, okay, well, this is changing, this is actually something from the 1970s. Other people say it's 19th century model of education. But you can go back to, ironically, Bologna, medieval university. I mean, take a look at this picture here. I mean, just change the fashion a little bit, take off the hats, get some women in there, and basically you've got something that's pretty recognizable today. And this is 1,000 years ago, And we've even got a guy here in the corner that if you've been to a 9 o'clock lecture, we can all empathize with him in the corner, So not an awful lot has changed in 1,000 years here, Why am I talking about this? Because lectures remain the central mode of traditional teaching and learning at most universities, even still. And also because several EU member states predict that in the next generation, they're looking at upwards of 50% of their population going through higher education, and by extension, being exposed to the traditional lecture mode of delivery. So it's something worth talking about. Now, a lot of people say, well, what is the solution? The solution we should focus on, the discussion at the moment in higher education is often framed around improving the lecture format and saying, okay, let's go from passive to active. Let's ask questions to the students. Let them ask questions. Let's do pre- and post-lecture tasks. Let's do quizzes, Okay, fine, and that's a very good idea. There's a huge body of cumulative knowledge, including a massive meta-analysis last year by Keenan in the States that says that students who are exposed to this mode of lecturing are about 1.5 times more likely to pass their exams. But this is not new information. And for me, this is something that is not a target. This is the bare minimum. This is the starting point. We should not accept anything less than this. It's not an objective. Because the bottom line is, if you want your students to actually learn something, don't just stand in front of the class, you have to interact with them. You have to get these synapses firing, okay? So I think that if we're talking about aiming towards making lectures more active as the solution to this problem, I'm afraid I think we're selling young people short, because in educational psychology, we understand completely that you can go a lot further than this in education. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. There's many ways you can go, but I'm just going to give you 2 examples of other things you can do that I've seen working in my own context. Okay? The first one is the flipped classroom. You're probably familiar with this, where you invert the traditional teaching model. You don't acquire knowledge in a lecture and then construct it at home. It's quite the reverse. So we've got a subject in the university I work in called professional and academic communication. And basically, the objectives are they've got to learn how to write reports, do presentations, do research, do citations, participate in meetings. Okay, we do all the theoretical stuff in the first few classes, kind of get it out of the way, and then we say, right, it's over to you. We go to the marketing teacher and say, hey, what are the students struggling with in your class? And she says, okay, it's the decision-making model and consumer behavior. They really don't get it. Okay, that's our first topic. Make a couple of videos on the community space, and the students watch that at home. They can pause, they can have a nap, they can come back, have a cup of tea, take it at their own pace. And when they come into class, they're all on the same page. And one group every week has to take it further. They have to take the concepts from the video and apply them to a brand or a context or whatever that they're interested in, and come in and do a presentation. So let's just look at what's actually happening in this class. You've got students choosing the context and the angle. Therefore, they're exercising control over their own learning. I don't give it to them. They prepare the presentation in teams. That's teamwork right away. Okay. They run the class. I mean, you can tell a well-designed class, I think, when you walk in and the students know what to do. They don't simply wait for the teacher to say, this is what we're going to do. They deliver the talk. This is communication. And this is peer teaching as well, because if you look at the scale of passive to active learning, the passive lecture is at the extreme end of that. then you've got reading, then you've got active side, active lectures, and at the extreme end of active learning, you have peer teaching. And maybe you've experienced this, that there's almost no better way to learn something than to teach someone else, you know? Then they chair a discussion on this, they show leadership, they write up the report, how did I do, what did I learn, self-reflection, critical thinking, and then I don't assess them, they assess each other. You know, giving, receiving feedback, being open to change, and maybe a little bit of humility too. And that's just in one class. The other model is experiential learning. Now, people think that, you know, it's maybe things like case studies, but actually a case study is not experiential, it's already happened. You have to adopt a persona to understand a case. You're not the protagonist, you know. Experiential learning is where the real world and the academic worlds actually come together, which is something we should see more, you know. And this is when your granddad says to you, you know, you don't need university. The university of life taught me everything I need to know. You say, yeah, okay, granddad, but you probably had a few disasters along the way. Probably a pretty rough ride, you know. I would disagree that experience is the best teacher and qualify that by saying evaluated experience is the best teacher. When you allow students to have genuine experiences but also create a framework around it so that they can genuinely reflect on this and build on it and learn from it, this is a very strong form of learning. Now, what we do in second year with our students, we have a project called Social Leadership. And this is something that if you're going to, you know, talk to a student about leadership and they have some abstract notion that it's something off in the distance at the top of some, you know, unattainable hierarchy, well, no, you know, let's bring it back down here. Let's talk about social leadership, which is using what you know and putting it at the disposal of people around you to enrich and nourish that community. And you show leadership in that way. How are you going to learn that in a book? I don't think you really can. So what we do is we go to the local government and say, look, what do you need? And they say, well, look, the kids in our high schools, they've got to do this huge end-of-year presentation, and they're petrified of it. The teachers are so overworked trying to get the content done, they don't have time to work on the delivery. We say, well, we can do that. So here they are. This is them just now preparing. They're actually learning here how to complement what you say with coherent hand gestures. And I'm probably breaking every rule in the book right now. They're not even there for credits. They're just there for kudos, you know. I mean, they're all volunteering to be part of this. And actually what they're going to do is, today at 2 o'clock, these guys you see in the picture, they're going to become for the very first time teachers. They're going to start teaching 3 workshops in communication skills, in public speaking, to high school students. You know, you can imagine how they're feeling, no? So this is a really transformational experience, and this is what education can bring if we just have a little bit of an impulse behind it. So we heard this morning about the 2020 targets, and I think these are very well intentioned, and I'm completely behind them. And I think that, and we're talking a little bit about it, you know, I think there still is a bit of a reality gap in higher education. I'm talking about what I can see. And basically, in a nutshell, why is this? Universities prioritize research credentials and academic prowess in the subject area, yeah, and say that's enough. They give teachers no pedagogical training. You go into primary school, high school, you get trained to become a teacher. University, you have a PhD, in you come. No study in the world will show a correlation between a PhD and the ability to teach. There is no correlation anywhere. So universities have to change that culture and become more supportive of investing in pedagogical training, because only by doing that will we ever manage to bring students to the front and center of their own learning, give them opportunities to take control, and bring back the voice and choice into higher education. Well, thanks very much.